Morning, Justin.
Good morning, Mark.
How are you, sir?
I'm well.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
No issues from Frisbee or anything. You're just
No issues from Frisbee.
doing well.
Yeah.
Glad to hear it.
It's getting that time of year, too. It's like perfect Frisbee weather.
Yes.
Like upper 50s, low 60s.
Yeah.
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 It's kind of, although I will say, your muscles take a little bit longer to be acclimated. You
Okay.
know,
Warm up?
to be convinced that you're doing something.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like,
Sure.
come on, let's do this.
Yeah.
You know?
I got you. You dress a little warmer to just kind of keep your muscles warm and go for it. Yeah. Good for you.
Yes, I didn't, but that's probably
Well,
what you should do.
that's what an older fella speaking to a younger fella would say.
That's
just
good.
dress warm first to keep your muscles
Speaking
warm.
to a younger fella, or someone who thinks he's a younger fella, but isn't quite.
Understood. But yeah,
good.
just keeping those warm makes a difference on those cold mornings or cold afternoons.
Yeah.
But yeah. Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations.
But it's interesting you bring up a shift in the seasons. Because I think, there's a lot that goes on with the change in the seasons. We end up, hurricanes come, and then...
How'd you guys make out, by the way?
We did well. I recognized, yes, with
Ian.
Yes, with Ian.
Coming on in.
Yeah, I recognized that we had 2 yards to clean up, which was not necessarily fun, but I was still thankful. And yet, at the same time, we got a ton of pecans. Pecans, pecan, however you want to say it.
I prefer... I don't know what I prefer. Pecan.
There you go.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Same here. A lot of debris pickup, but I'm sat by the burn barrel all day Saturday, just shoving stuff in. And...
Yeah, I got a heck of a bonfire ready to go.
Yeah.
I didn't. By the time we finished up, I didn't torch it. But yeah. I'm ready for one of those cool nights to go ahead and on a weekend or something like that. But yeah,
that'd be good.
Little twigs, it'll go up quick. But yeah.
Yeah, and then other seasonal things. Everyone loves fall. Not everyone. Most people I know.
Right.
I don't know that I know anyone who doesn't love fall.
Well, you're a coffee drinker.
I don't love fall.
But I was just thinking most coffee drinkers love fall because they can get their pumpkin spice.
Well, I do love some pumpkin spice latte.
See?
The PSL, it's a classic.
Okay. I got you.
Let me ask you, have you ever tried a pumpkin spice latte?
I can't say as if I have. I have tried. I've had coffee before.
I mean,
but
I don't know. It's coffee adjacent, definitely.
Okay.
But they're just, they're very flavored and, it's kind of dessert in a cup.
I am convinced that most of the people who say they love or like coffee really don't like coffee. They like the flavor.
Right.
That they
like
can
the
put
extract.
in coffee.
Coffee extract to put in the milk and the flavor.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just ironic to me. I mean, granted, very few people that I know drink it black. There you go. You are drinking it black this morning. So
yeah, I have further proof that I love coffee. I drink decaf and half calf most of the time.
Okay.
So, a lot of people drink coffee for the caffeine kick.
Sure.
That kind of thing. Caffeine has not done a whole lot for me. Like, it doesn't really wake me up. It doesn't really keep me up at night. Okay. So
sure.
I typically drink half calf or decaf, depending on the situation, because I just like the flavor of it. I just want the coffee. I don't care about
No, I know you like coffee because you got that little tattoo on your foot, on your leg too. That
little coffee cup.
A little coffee cup.
That's
so
right.
anybody that's going to put a, tattoo on their body that has a coffee cup, I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
They're going to like coffee to some degree.
That's true.
Yeah.
It also says morning.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's interesting you bring that tattoo up because so today, just as a long segue, but we're going to attempt to talk a little bit about depression and that topic. But that tattoo, it says morning. It's got a little apostrophe at the end and it's right above a coffee cup. And when Mia was pretty young, just one morning I remember I said, morning. And she said, you always say that, Dad. You always say morning. And there was something about that like cheery, happy dad thing that just made me want to identify that way.
Nice.
Right? Like I want to be that cheery, happy morning dad, And so when I saw that little art that said that,
yeah,
little coffee cup, I'm like, yep, I'm going to get that.
Nice.
And that kind of ties into this whole subject because for me, I want to identify that way, not identify as the like, depressive or like, the dark individual or whatever. And I think for me, that's a big, important part to my particular battle with depression is like not allowing that to be an identification thing or allowing it to be, instead it's just very seasonal. And as we were discussing about the season, there's a thing called SAD, right? Seasonal affective disorder. I think it goes by other terms too, right?
But that's what we'll use for
seasonal
this one.
Depression, other people say, yeah.
Yep.
And that's affected me a lot of my life, which is, I look back now and I go, well, duh, that's why I don't like fall.
Sure.
But there's just so much to fall that's triggering for me. I mean, it's the days get darker, quicker, it's cooler where, you can just wear shorts. It just felt so summery and happy. Now you gotta like, and a lot of people love these things.
Sure.
And then things are dying and things are falling off the trees. Like, it also represents going back to school when I was younger, like leaving fun things, going to hard things. I don't know. There's just a lot about that season that I'm like, it's the worst. And in Minnesota too, the non-summer months are many more than in North Carolina. Sure. So it's like, we're starting the beginning of a long, time
a long
of
season.
Yeah.
Process.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, what are your thoughts, Mark?
When it comes to depression, my thoughts are many. Number one, I have empathy for people who experience it, and I can even become frustrated. Not with people who experience depression, but people who have never experienced depression. Because I believe so often I hear it in a guilt and shame type context. We'll just cut that out, basically. Think happy thoughts.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I respect the complexity as we're talking about, nature. And how nature, when I, just like you to that degree, when I start noticing those days getting shorter, sad is one of those things that comes to my mind, because I respect the fact that, I personally don't necessarily, I don't say that I struggle with depression as from a clinical standpoint. I wouldn't be, but at the same time, based on what I do, when I see that change coming, I know that there's going to be people who are contacting me based on what they're experiencing and the depression they feel and, those kind of things. And even to that degree, I recognize there is going to be a regression even for some of my clients who I've been working with and who have been making a progress, if you will, that I think this time of year tends to create a little setback. And, and sometimes even in my own mind, I'm saying, shucks, this is what we're up against. And, I don't make light of it, and yet I can also respect the opposite happens sometimes at the end of spring and coming, when we come into spring. I can also see this
lightning.
This lightning.
Yeah.
Yes, not as in lightning and thunder, but
right.
yes, to where there is an excitement. Whereas now it tends to be a little more oppressive for some people. And even as you shared, it's like this awful season, and I recognize that, there again, there's a lot of thoughts that go into what's happening and the dread. And I'm not saying that's the only context for depression, but I think it's just adds to the complexity.
Yeah, it does. You mentioned the word regression, and that's it's what I've figured out with my struggle with depression. Mine is very what's the word?
Integral?
No.
Intermittent?
Yes, thank you.
No problem.
That was going to take me a long time to come up with that word. Sometimes a word just flies away. Intermittent. So, it's certainly not every fall. In my experience, it's not every fall. It's also not predictable in that way. And then I know it's fall, so it's going to Sometimes it's spring, and I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense, because for me, traditionally, spring is a lightning, like you said, is very much like things start to feel alive again, But the regression thing, when it comes, I feel like my normal mental fortitude for things, it's just gone,
Yeah.
And so things that I could, offenses, right? Like things that happen to, quote unquote, to me, in my normal good days or whatever, I've gained a lot of tools over the years to go, oh yeah, that's not me, that's them, right?
Sure.
Or that makes sense that this would happen because of X, Y, or Z, or benefit of a doubt. I bet that's not it's an offensive thing. It's because of this other thing that I'm missing, right? And be able to kind of do the footwork to just deal with things, deal with life, being a normal human being.
Reframe it even to a certain degree. Sure.
I guess be mature, right, in the way that I handle interactions in life that don't necessarily whatever. But when I'm struggling with depression, it's like all that willpower to fight that. It doesn't take a whole lot of willpower normally. It takes a lot of willpower to go. So for a long time, it was essentially a regression, like you said, where in those periods of time, everything I'd gained, it was now back to, no, I really think that person is doing that or whatever. And it would be a lot more of that, where nowadays, I kind of just give up in a sense of trying to assess guilt.
Sure.
Right? And just go, well, I know whatever I'm going to think about this isn't going to be right. And I also know, I don't know, I can't coach myself out of it either. So I kind of just let it be. And, I don't know, it ends up being this blah place, that I end up in as a result of trying to keep away from the arg place.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. I think when we tend to, if I may say, fight any emotion, it tends to prolong it to a certain degree. I'm not saying fight it in a sense of, like you were saying, reframing, but resisting that ability to feel, to where, yes, I would, and I know it sounds strange, but I think, I equate emotions to like a boat on the water. If we see it on the right horizon, it's going to become a black dot. It is going to start out as a black dot, and then it's going to be identifiable, and we're going to see it, and we're going to hear it, and, all those things. And then it's going to go back to being a black dot again on my left as it passes by. And I think, I believe that emotions are very similar to that. But when we tend to want to get in the water and fight the boat, keep it from happening, keep it from going by, keep it from occurring, I think that's counter to our ability to recognize that, emotions come and emotions go. And I believe, depression is part of that overwhelming emotion of, I guess the inability to deal with certain things. I'm not saying people can't, but that's what I will tend to walk with people through is those I can'ts, because I believe that's where that depressive thought ties into the feeling is, I can't do this. I can't deal with this. Or what I'll quite often hear is I don't feel like it, which is very much identifying what you're saying. I just don't have the energy,
Yeah.
And so, and at that point, I think there's a lot of factors that can tie into that. It's not as simple as saying, okay, I just need to think about it differently, because I believe it is complex in that mind body connection, if you will, that basically says, I really don't feel that I have energy to deal with this. And yet there is that part of me, like that boat, it's like once I start seeing that black dot on my right, it's like I start getting resistant to it. It's like, oh no, here it comes, and I, instead of being able to say, and I think that would be something that you might even agree to, you can push back, of course, or disagree even, I think there's tools to be able to move, but I think there's also something to be able to kind of accept that this is coming and this will pass.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
So an analogy I'll often use in terms of my particular struggle with depression, I don't want to paint any other person's version, but is I kind of describe it as this river that's, nearby, and some days, summer, spring, whatever, good things happening, I can maybe barely hear the river, but maybe not, right? Like in the distance. And, it's that kind of far away, and, kind of like your boat analogy, but instead of a boat, there's this river and geographically close by.
Yeah.
And fall, it's like every fall, I can see the river.
Sure.
Pretty much every fall.
The leaves fall off the trees.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They were blocking it, and I can see it again, and hear it. And so, and that's what I've had to learn, is that that's not bad. It's not bad to see the river. And then there's days too where I'm waiting in the river, and probably shouldn't be, like, it's not necessarily the safest river, but I'm also not, and I recognize too that that's not necessarily bad. It's just it's part of what happens, right?
So point of clarification.
Yeah.
As you share that, do you choose to go into the river?
No.
That's where
okay. I think depression is very spiraling.
Okay.
Right. So a big part of my efforts as I've grown older and try and like deal with it properly is to not. That's what I was saying about the thing with offenses, right? It's like, instead of spiraling, like, it must be because of this, which is really because of this, which is really because I'm a terrible person and I'll never be able to overcome this. It spirals. Like, it will take you under, to go back to the analogy. But, and so there are times where, just like when you're drowning, if you flail, you're guaranteeing your demise. It's that kind of thing. But I wouldn't say someone drowning is choosing to flail, to drown, right?
I hear you.
And I feel like depression in some ways is that. However, some people, I think, embrace depression differently, right?
Sure.
Where it is something, I'm just going to fall into that. And because there is this weird fleshly desire to just go into this hole of selfishness, which is really what it is. And when I'm in it, like, part of the spiral is me beating myself up for being so selfish, and just like, what's wrong with you? All you can think about, yeah. But anyway, back to
what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
No, I hear you. Those are the thoughts that tend to come
Yeah.
in that kind of...
And it moves from what's wrong with you to more of a, well, these are the things that are like just kind of a judgment is pronounced in my head.
Since you asked,
yeah,
I can tell you,
exactly.
I'm gonna make the list.
I know
up.
exactly what I am, and it's it's all mostly lies, or like just the version of a truth that's so devoid of hope and
snippets,
faith, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, just the river thing too. Like there's sometimes I'm on the edge of the river. And it's like, I feel the rocks slipping and I really shouldn't be here. And it's like, part of what I try to do is reach out to others and ask for prayer, that kind of thing. Because I found out that reaching out is a pretty important part. But then sometimes you still slip and sometimes you get wet, and you're wet. The way I describe it, though, is that the worst moments are, oops, I slipped, but now I'm rolling under the rapids, current, right? Yeah. Like I can't come up for air. And in those times, the way I describe it is the only way I'm getting out is if God pulls me out. And so I've used that analogy of his arm reaching in, pulling me out, and I get out on the shore where he puts me in. I look where I was and I go, wow, thank you,
Sure.
And in those moments, there's a profound gratitude that nothing has ever replaced that level of like kind of profundity. I don't know. I think that's a word.
I'm good with it.
In that gratitude where it's just like, I don't know. It's so there's something about that whole cycle that everything about it's bad, but that coming out part has always been good.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Sure.
The end.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah. There's a level of gratitude, and I've said before too. Like there's several times, many times, there's a song for some reason that is kind of the arm reaching in that just grabs me, sure. and they're not usually like super, they're not like the happy peppy songs. There's something in it, some truth. Yes, there's some truth that grabs me. But yeah. So that river analogy, I use that a lot because I think it's hard to kind of explain what it is, and also the thing what you said is, people who have never experienced it tend to have a hard time with it. Just it doesn't make sense. Just be happy, choose something different. And it's like, once you're kind of, there are things I can choose to do when I'm on, waiting, right? Like I can choose to reach out and hope that pulls me up on the bank, and it often does, right?
Sure.
But there's a certain point where you don't have agency with your movement. I mean, you are in the water, or the current's too strong, or whatever, and you're fighting a current that's stronger than you are. Essentially, is what the issue is. And so someone saying, "Just try harder," it's like, you get in here and try harder.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For you, and I'm thinking about that reaching out, that analogy, the riverbank, that kind of thing. For you, how important is having community? People around you that is consistent. Consistency,
I think that's the key, really, because I've always been a very social person and had a pretty big community. And that can be so consistency is a key word, but also closeness is another key word. So
sure.
So I'll get to that in a second. But the size of my community can actually, so a lot of things that are tools in a healthy life become weaponized when I'm struggling with depression. So for instance, all the truth that I've gained over the years through, doing the work that I've done through Celebrate Recovery, just like all the truth that I've learned, I start to beat myself up with it when I'm struggling with depression. And it, that spiral thing of like, the truth, this, the way you feel is just wrong. Like you should be happy, you should be grateful for what the situation, the season you're in. Cause like a lot of times when I'm struggling with depression, if you look at my life, there's no reason I should. And this is what I'm telling myself. Yeah. Like things are, and it's, so that truth and that recognition that I should be a grateful human being starts to be condemning.
Sure.
So the thing with community is it's always a tool, right? It's a very important thing when I'm healthy. When I start to slip is when I start to go, why isn't anyone reaching in to pull me out? And that, especially before I'm working through this my whole life, but like, especially in the beginning, it was just me saying, yeah, I don't have any real friends, because when I'm struggling like this, there's not anyone to pray for me, to reach in, to say, hey, it looks like you're struggling with, that, anything like that, Now, there isn't actually, an implication, or, I have always, and I think this is a very common thing with people with depression, a lot of people with depression, is you put on a mask to look happy, to pretend to be the same person you were yesterday or before the struggle. So of course people aren't asking how you're doing, because you look perfectly fine for the most part. There might be a few things, if someone knows you really well, that they might go, when you do that, But for the most part, there's not all these signals. You desperately want someone to know you that well, and they don't, because how could they?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense, especially in combination with the mask.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of our relationships aren't necessarily that deep to where, or that consistent in such a process of, daily, seeing somebody weekly, maybe, that's not necessarily a great indicator.
Yeah, but even what I was going to say earlier. So even weekly is way better than not weekly.
Sure.
So
sure.
I do a weekly accountability with some friends, and so what I was getting at earlier is the consistency and the closeness. So the stuff we talk about, we talk about stuff you're accountable for, right? So we talk about some very deep stuff together and very personal stuff, and so these relationships are very close just as a result of the things that you're sharing. So
sure.
And the fact that it's weekly means even during those seasons, I'm going to be meeting.
Sure.
And in the way we do accountability is not what a lot of people think of accountability, which is I have to go in and report on myself. It's kind of I have to go in and people are going to hold me accountable and say, how are you doing with this? It's the opposite, where we report on ourselves.
Sure.
And basically say, these 8 areas, here's how we're doing. And we kind of do a weekly report card essentially on ourselves.
Sure.
Right? And so we can lie if we want to. Yeah, we can lie if we want to. But it kind of defeats the purpose of getting up early to go meet together. It's like, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to do what you're supposed to do. The thing that works, right?
Sure.
It doesn't work to lie. So
I'm going to take the mask off.
Yeah.
Is what it
exactly.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. So in those moments, I can say, it's been a tough week.
Sure.
And I can talk about it, and they'll pray over me. And so that consistency allows me to speak it out.
Sure.
And man, just speaking it out is so instrumental to stopping the spiral. And especially when there's not condemnation.
That's speaking it out. How, and on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is that to actually verbalize what's going on for you?
I want to say 9.
9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
For me personally.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Yeah. And I think the struggle is we don't want to verbalize it because it's so personal and embarrassing and shameful, that we want to get through it, and then we'll be fine, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot with me. Like, I'm happy to share. I mean, I'm doing a podcast right now, right? I'm happy to share about it, afterwards, the struggle. And I have no problem sharing that. In the moment, it feels like I'm the weakest human being in the world, and I don't want anyone to know that. It's just this shameful, embarrassing thing.
And that's what leads to the desire to isolate.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all very spiraling, right? Just the isolation, the judgment, the shame. Yeah. These are just all buzzwords for.
Sure. And as we're thinking about this and community and isolation, how does that for you? How does that affect you spiritually? How do you how does your view of God or view of your spiritual life or your desire to have communion, if I may say so, not in a literal sense, but in a spiritual sense? Yeah. How is that affected?
So. It's tested, right? Like my faith is tested. Absolutely, because essentially I'm saying I'm about to drown. I need your help, Like those are a lot of prayers like that, just I'm really close to the edge and I really need you to hold me, not let me slip, that kind of thing. But very often, by often I mean, maybe once a year or whatever, minimum, I do slip. And so it's like, why did you let that? There's no good in that hole. Why do you let me go in it?
Sure.
Because I know my faith knows that he can do anything.
Gotcha.
So I know you can keep me out, which means I also know you didn't. Right?
Sure.
And so there's a lot of wrestling with that. And again, I've transitioned over the years to not fight that fight, but just let it be what it is. Like, well, I don't agree with you, but I'm also not going to argue. Yeah. I'm just going to wait. Right. And so that's a big aspect of how I fight it in the moment now is wait. I do think back to the community thing. I think I could short circuit it and by reaching out. But it's just so darn hard to do it, and it's just frustrating how it's silly to me looking back at the situations, how hard it is. In the moment, I mean, I know what it feels like. It's just like it's like not an option. Yeah. Which is silly. Because what happens is I'll do inventory of my friends. Well, that person's dealing with that. They can't. They don't have time, or they, I know they're struggling. I don't want to throw my.
They got enough with their own stuff,
right? Yeah, well, that person's busy. Like they got this going on. And then this person, I know if I do this, it'll turn into this question, this conversation. They're gonna get it all wrong. Like, and I'm gonna have to answer questions about stuff that's not relevant. And I'll just go through the list, right? Or this person, yeah. So you just kind of do that. Sure. Or like Megan, for instance, she's my wife and she's my favorite accountability partner. Sure. But when it comes to this, it feels so excusey that I don't want to share it with her because I feel like it sounds like I'm making excuses for my behavior. When often I am trying to explain this is why I responded that way, or this is why I not doing the things that I normally would do in this situation. But it's as I hear it come out of my mouth, it makes me almost feel gross about it, like excuses, and not that I don't think Megan's thinking that necessarily. I just think that's how I think she'll think, and also how I think as I hear. That's how it sounds to you. Yes. Sure. Yeah. And therefore, you think that she hears it the same way. Yeah. And so, like I said, you just go down the list of all the people that you're close to and come up with all the reasons why they're not the person to share this with this time. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it ends up, it's everybody. Yeah. Right? Yeah. No, I can't share with anyone. Yeah. Because everyone has a reason why it wouldn't. Yeah. And that's why the accountability thing's so important because, well, these people have to be here. And I have to share the truth about my situation. So, you just happen to be the faces that are going to hear it. You know what I mean? Yeah, no doubt. So that's a very good thing for me. Sure. To have that, but. Yeah. And that helps you avoid that unintended, if I may say so, isolation. Yeah. That comes along with it, with depression where you're concerned. Yeah. And we already said this, but you just really want to isolate and I mean, I know we already said that, but it's just so profoundly true. Like you really want to cancel this and postpone that. And it's not that, it's just easier not to do the things, you know what I mean? And there is that's definitely one of the symptoms, right? Is this desire to not do things, sleep in, whatever. And I really think it just has so much to do with how much energy it takes to do anything, If I may, speaking of the energy, is there a part of that intermittent for you
that might come like after like extremely hectic or extremely busy times as well as I'm go ahead. I guess I'm just thinking about it in a context of energy and realizing sometimes I think there is when we come out of an extremely busy season, we can kind of recognize, depression is different than like fatigue. But yeah, I think, depending on how much energy I have, that can also have can you speak to that as far as you're concerned? Or is that something you see or have noticed or not even relevant?
I think for me, the biggest struggle with it is that there isn't a prescriptive thing to look at to say, when this happens, that happens.
Sure.
And that's why there's so many times where I just dip into depression, and part of the spiral is, but there's no reason. This didn't happen. That didn't happen. Some of the things that maybe I've identified, right?
Yeah.
Because I do think there are some triggers, but I've also recognized that I don't get depressed every time that trigger happens. And sometimes you get depressed and that trigger didn't happen. So is it a trigger? I don't know.
I hear you.
That's kind of...
Yeah.
So I do think it's good to be aware of the things that can be triggering.
Of course.
And I think for me, being mindful of those situations and, again, being proactive and, confessing those things in prayer with accountability and saying like, hey, this particular thing's happening. Let's use the busy example. Really busy and about to be, wrap up all these busy things. And that can be a trigger for me. So if you just pray for me, that'd be great. That kind of, I think that's very important.
Sure.
For me, I think that can be a trigger where there's essentially a lot of responsibilities and they kind of all end similar time. And one thing I know is a trigger for me is validation or lack thereof. And like, that's just such an annoying fact to me.
If you will, that pleasing people type
approval, needing approval. Yeah. Especially like if you give something your all and you're looking for maybe, I would say at this point in my life, I'm not looking for approval. I don't set out to do things for approval, but I still expect it, right? Like,
sure.
That's part of my people pleasing nature is like looking around for that validation. If you give your all and the validation isn't what you wanted, that can be very triggering, very triggering. And again, it just feeds that spiral of you're so immature and you're so needy and just whatever, you attack yourself for all the reasons, but that certainly can be a thing. This, a recent episode, I also was wondering if it's lack of water consumption.
I remember you sharing. Yes.
Yeah, like I had a headache all day, fighting that along with just this, just depressive day, and realized at the end of the day, I got a headache. Maybe I haven't really had much to drink, and it kind of feels like I need to drink. So I drank a ton of water. My headache went away. And next day I was back square one, perfectly fine. Didn't feel depressed. And I'm like, interesting, because I definitely, some of the recent episodes we've done, we've talked a lot about physiological things in our body that can trigger, mental things too as well. So that I'm like, that's definitely a thing that could be a thing.
Sure.
I should probably think about that next time, drink a bunch of water. Just why not, right?
No harm in it.
There's
no harm in it.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, in terms of triggers, it can definitely be validation. It can also just be outlook is dim, e.g. fall, right?
Sure.
Literally dim in that it's dark or gray and, too many gray days in a row. Outlook feels dim. It just really impacts me, those gray days. And it's, again, you look at it and go, how immature are you? Like, just come on, man. That's not a big deal. Like, life's the same on a gray day as it's a sunny day. And yet my brain doesn't get it, So, so that can be a trigger as well. But again, none of those things are guarantees. But a lot of those things are almost always take me to the edge of the river. Like, so that's why, I've identified them as triggers. Is like they are the most common things to bring me to where I can hear the river, see the river, wade in the river. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm even thinking, as we talk about the physiology of it to a certain degree, I'm curious from your perspective, how physical activity or exercise, if you will, ties into that. I'm just curious from that dynamic of, as we talk about Frisbee and, an ultimate, that kind of thing, is the amount of physical activity you have in a season helpful? Because I realize, as we come into winter, sometimes we're not doing as much. Mm-hmm. You follow me? We're in the summer, at the beginning of summer sometimes, we are getting out. We're going for bike rides. We're going for walks with the family. We're, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yet, as the days get colder and as, they get shorter and, our work day remains pretty much the same, we get those constraints on both ends of the work day.
Yeah.
And unless, you're in a lighted facility or something like a park or whatever,
yeah, you're just not doing as much.
You're just not doing as much. Is that? And here again, I respect the fact that yours is intermittent, but do you see a connection for you on the physical activity side of it?
I would say I have not drawn the connection there, but I think it would be foolish to say they're not connected in any way, and I do think it's important to. In so many people who struggle with depression and who don't say that's an important part of, having a healthy mental state. And I agree with that completely. But I have not found that like a direct, perfectly
causation.
To where it's like, if I don't work out, I definitely see it play out that way. And if I do, I definitely see it play out that way because and I think that ties into just my distaste for exercise. Like, exercise for exercise sake.
Sure, no, I hear you.
I think I struggle more with just having to do it than the benefits mentally. I don't know. But like Frisbee, we play that twice a week, and I'm in as good a shape as I've been in years just from running a lot for 2 days a week. And I still get depressed, so...
No, I see. Yeah. I was just curious based on that, if you had noticed it or if you would say it has had an impact. I'm not saying that you don't get depressed anymore, but is it a matter of becoming at times less often or shorter segments?
The problem is exercise for someone like me. It comes with a whole bunch of mental baggage, whether I'm exercising in something like F3 or playing Frisbee. And so it's not like I just get the free benefits of the exercise. I'm also dealing with mental stuff when I exercise.
Help me understand that.
So F3, I'm dealing with, why can't I do as many push-ups as I did yesterday? Like, that's a very common thing that I'm just having to, like, get over. Like, it's fine. You don't have to be as good as you were yesterday.
Comparison.
Or saying... I beat what I did yesterday. It's just like this mental thing that I think, honestly, a lot of people enjoy. Like, that's part of what makes exercising enjoyable for some people, I think, is kind of that. But for me, it's just this, I don't know, mental battle. Or looking at the person, comparison next to me going, well, they're doing that many, I guess I have to. And then doing it and then going, I shouldn't do that. I can't. I'm not that good as them. And then that comparison of, I'm not that good, right? Like, I'm not as good as that person. And then going, well, should I be? And like, well, how old are they? How many kids do they have? Like, that's what I mean. My mental baggage is like, a lot of that stuff's going through my head, but just stupid exercise stuff. Like, it's, and I'm battling it from a maturity standpoint, going, stop it, get back to the exercise. You know what I mean? Like, I have this mature version of me in my head saying, hey, you get back to work. And then I do. And it's not like, exercising doesn't make me depressed. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying depression kind of enhances whatever emotions you're dealing with. Right? So if I'm struggling with depression and dealing with these kind of comparison things, I mean, they'll be enhanced, It's
a lens you're looking through.
And then with Frisbee, the validation comes into play. Like, how good did I do? And did people see that catch? And I've talked about that in the past too, like where sometimes it becomes too important, those competitive sports, because it's like that becomes my source of fulfillment in a sense of like, yeah, see, I still got it or whatever it is. And yeah, I don't want that, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's part of it. And there's two sides to it, because a good day where you run hard, you make some catches, you play tough, right? It's good on the psyche, and it makes you feel accomplished in a sense. And there's that aspect to exercise and sports that I think is healthy, like that physical building up,
Sure,
so to speak. But then the inverse happens, where maybe you're slightly injured because, I'm old and I get injured and can't quite perform to the same level, and I drop that frisbee tonight, whatever. And it's like, it can be a thing that I'm just have to walk off at the end of the night and say, oh, it's just frisbee, and get back to a normal life. But does that make sense? So then you add depression on top of either of those emotions, whatever, and it can enhance those in an unhealthy degree.
Sure.
So that's why I would say I haven't necessarily noticed a correlation between it directly benefiting my mental health or not. It's more like, it's just, if I could remove all the mental stuff from exercise, I think to me it'd be a no-brainer.
Sure.
Because I definitely think the healthy side of things helps.
Sure.
Drinking water or whatever, eating healthy, all those things I know help.
Sure.
Eating healthy, I think, is probably something I could more directly point to. Like, if I'm eating better, I tend to feel better mentally. And it doesn't quite come with the same amount of baggage, so
yeah,
it's a long answer to your.
No, it's okay. That's how, when you say eating better, help me understand that. I know we've had Mary Beth in here, and demonstrated, how, eating helps our body heal. But for you personally,
And Mary Ellen too.
Mary Ellen too, sure. Yeah.
Well, before I move on from exercise, I think there are probably many people who struggle with depression where exercise is the main tool that would work for them. So I don't want to disparage that as being something to try, because I do think anything that is a healthy endeavor could be a very healthy tool for dealing with depression, because not everyone's the same kind of personality, and that's just my particular take on it.
No, I hear you.
As far as eating,
the more tools we have in our box, the better off we are. Yeah. Yes, I hear you in combating it. It's not that there's always going to be one specific tool that makes it go away, but sometimes there's a complexity. Yeah. Yeah, in that. Yeah.
And as far as eating healthy, I just mean, fruits and vegetables.
Whole foods.
Whole foods, but also not, like throughout the week, like I'll eat lunch at home instead of going out to eat, like, and able to make some healthy choices. Yeah, I think for me, what constitutes healthy is just, I know certain things when, as I eat them, I'll feel, fueled, and certain things I'll eat them and I'll feel like I need to take a nap.
I hear you.
And so anything that I eat makes me feel like I need to take a nap, I know isn't contributing towards my mental health. Sure. And so that's, so a lot of times if I eat lunch out and get a big burger or something like that, it makes me want to take a nap, and I know that's not contributing in the best ways, but often the social aspect of eating out with somebody is more than makes up for that. But I'm just saying, I definitely notice.
But and I think that's an important part for anyone, is to be aware of the little things that we can do. Yeah.
It's true.
Going out is good is from a relationship standpoint and social interaction versus isolation. And yet at the same time, the food that I choose is also going to be an important part of that. Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense as well. So yeah. Any other connectors that you've noticed for you that you can say, this definitely impacts? We've kind of, talked about the exercise dynamic, the food dynamic. What else is there? Are there any other tools that you recognize are helpful?
Yeah, well, music I mentioned a little bit, but music is it can go both directions. I mean, I think kind of like what I was saying about exercise, depression can enhance whatever, basically enhance anything you're doing, right? So, sure. But Yeah, so certain music will just add to the depression of like, yeah, life is sad and hard, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But sometimes, I don't know, like there's been many times where it's, like I said, been a song that stood out for some reason.
Right.
That grabs me. And, yeah, so I would definitely say music, like listening to encouraging music. And you have to be careful with that because, I mean, like Eli Dummer joked about some music, if it's too happy, it will just make you angry. And I definitely can relate to that, where like happy, peppy, faith-filled Christian music, you know, like K-Love kind of music, just really grates on me when I'm struggling. And I need something a little more ground level, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
grassroots, kind of fundamental,
I guess,
foundational type stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes it can be a lyric from one of those songs too. Like and I'm not saying those, again, this is not prescriptive for anybody, because for them, I hear a lot of people listen to it because it's encouraging to them, and it could be the thing that keeps them out of depression. I'm not saying that's, I'm just saying for me personally. So it's often songs like, so Need to Breathe is one of those bands that I love, and I think he's said it, but if he hasn't said it, it's definitely, I feel like, painted all over in his albums that he struggles with depression. And he often comes back to God. And yeah, a lot of those songs will really just grab me in a different way.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
I do.
And I guess make me feel a love from God. A lot of those songs will. Because it's the same thing of like, I think you can heal me and just pull me out of it, but I also know this song's hitting that way because that's the song you put in front of me today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there's this balance of like, well, I wish that your love represented me not going down that thing, but I'm so thankful your love represents giving me this and the way out. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting too that you know, I would dare say you would feel a connection with Need to Breathe, you know, based on what you know, perceive or know of from their lyrics, their songs, and, you know, recognizing that someone else deals with depression as well, versus some, you know, writer on K-Love that's just kind of singing the same song, and you may not know their story. And so therefore, what do they know? In that part of it, you know, but I think it is helpful when someone else is able to speak from that, from the river, if you will, and say, yeah, I know what it's like to lose my footing and tumble and roll. Yeah, that's right. That's the music that I long for, right? Yeah. The music from the river. That's so good. That's going to be your next album, you know, From the River with Justin. Yes.
Yeah, and even like the Caleb thing, like there's going to be some people on there singing songs that they wrote from their masked place, right? Like they had their mask, and maybe they're just like me, but their song sounds like what they wish they were, and I wish it's like,
sure.
You know, like you said, you don't know people's story, and it's not a judgment of that music. It's just like how I respond to it, and
yeah. And it's I think it's fair to say from a musical standpoint, there are people who are singing other people's songs.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, because not everybody writes their own stuff. So, of course, that's going to have a little different feel, you know, based on that relationship and that kind of thing. So, yeah. Anything else?
Anything else from you?
Oh.
Therapist Mark.
Oh.
That was plenty from me.
Well, no, that's okay. And I recognize that through this, we desire to be a source of hope.
Yeah.
And I want to recognize that, you know, in depression, we can tend to make choices that lead to isolation, that lead to the thing, you know, that we know isn't necessarily beneficial. And yet, being able to recognize, okay, sometimes I have the ability to make that one choice and I can choose that. And for me, that, that's the tool to be able to say, okay, in this depressive, overwhelming, out of control dynamic, what choices do I have? Mm-hmm. And being able to start there, whether it is food, whether it is exercise, whether it's, just being able to, go outside in the middle of the day and look up at the sun, or that kind of thing, mm-hmm. to be able to recognize the choices that I do have. I need to be mindful of them. And, because I believe it is multifaceted. It's not like there is one thing. And, and we, in this, we haven't even, discussed medication or anything mm-hmm. like that, but I also think I see it as very similar in some ways to trauma, in the sense that no one thing, EMDR, yoga, all these different tools, not one thing works for everyone who experiences what they experience. And I think that's where I can appreciate that. And I think in some ways for me, it is about building on what I know, building on what I've learned through this process. As you shared, it's like, yeah, I've been in this water before. And I'm always thankful for the times when God pulls me out, and so even being able to have that going forward, I think is helpful mm-hmm. in that process of, okay, there's going to be an end to this. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure when, mm-hmm. I don't know how long I'm going to be here, but there's going to be an end. Mm-hmm. And I respect the fact for some people, they lose sight of that. And unfortunately, they may end their own lives just because they see there is no end. Mm-hmm. And those, of course, those are the people that I feel for the most, mm-hmm. And I guess that's where, that's part of what helps me take my job very seriously, because I realize people are that close some days. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yes, my desire is to be able to offer what hope I can, as kind of seeds planted. Hmm. And so, like you say, that's where I would come back to, is being able to say, okay, what have I learned in this process, and how do I hold on to that and use it at this time?
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I think, like you said, my primary thing I would like to just share is that there is hope.
Yes.
Even when it feels like there isn't, because there is times where you will feel like there isn't.
Sure.
That's not the truth.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so sometimes understanding that your brain's just lying to you and there is hope, but mm-hmm. it just doesn't feel like it is a tool,
Yes.
Yeah.
It's that one step. It's that one choice that I have.
Yeah. And in the moment, it feels like an eternity. And it also feels like the last episode was yesterday and the next episode is tomorrow. It feels like there is no space between the episodes.
Yeah.
And that's also not true. And then the next day after an episode, I'm like, who was that person? Because this is who I am.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah. So I think just recognizing those moments come, they go. You're not alone. There is hope. There are tools, but at the same time, this is a very real thing that very many people struggle with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing, Justin.
Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing out of your hope and the importance of community and avoiding isolation and those kinds of things.
Thank you for sharing from a empathetic therapist perspective.
Gotcha.
Get a lot of empathy. Well, I shouldn't say that, but it's hard.
No.
So I appreciate it.
Happy to do it. This is how we see it.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.